The thunder rolled across the Montana sky as Catherine Eldridge clutched her 3-month-old daughter to her chest, the threadbare shawl doing little to shield them from the cutting November rain of 1877. Her husband's final words still rang in her ears. "I won't raise another man's bastard," as the door slammed behind her, casting her out into the growing storm with nothing but the clothes on her back and her precious Emma. Catherine stumbled down the muddy road leading away from the mining town of Silver Creek, her tears mingling with the raindrops on her face. At 23, she had never imagined she would find herself homeless, her reputation destroyed by vicious lies. Her husband James had convinced himself that her child wasn't his, despite her unwavering faithfulness. His jealousy, fueled by whiskey and the poisonous words of his mining friends, had finally erupted into violence. The baby whimpered against her chest, and Catherine pulled the thin blanket tighter around her daughter's tiny form. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We'll find shelter soon." But as she looked at the darkening landscape ahead, the rolling hills and distant mountains offered no promise of refuge. The rain intensified, soaking through her dress and making each step heavier than the last. Catherine had been walking for hours, putting as much distance as possible between herself and Silver Creek. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and hunger gnawed at her stomach she hadn't eaten since morning. When she spotted the faint glow of a lantern in the distance, Catherine nearly wept with relief. As she drew closer, she made out the silhouette of a modest cabin nestled against a stand of pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. A small barn stood nearby, and a corral housed several horses that huddled together against the storm. Catherine hesitated at the edge of the property. She had nowhere else to go, but approaching a stranger's home after dark was dangerous for a woman alone. The baby's cry, more insistent now, made the decision for her. Gathering her courage, she trudged up to the cabin door and knocked. For a long moment, there was silence. Then she heard the sound of boot steps approaching. The door swung open, and Catherine found herself looking up into the weathered face of a tall man with keen blue eyes that widened at the sight of her. "Good heavens," he said, his deep voice carrying a note of shock. "What are you doing out in this storm, madam?" "Please," Catherine said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "My baby, we need shelter." The man's gaze moved to the bundle in her arms, where Emma's tiny face was just visible among the folds of the blanket. Without another word, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said firmly. "You'll catch your death out there." Catherine stumbled across the threshold, her legs nearly giving way beneath her as the warmth of the cabin enveloped her. The man caught her elbow, steadying her with a gentle but firm grip. "The name's Zachary Turner," he said, guiding her to a chair by the fire. "Folks call me Zach, Catherine Eldridge," she replied, her teeth chattering, "and this is Emma." Zach moved with efficient grace around the cabin, bringing her a towel and a blanket, then filling a mug with steaming coffee from the pot on the stove. "Drink this," he instructed. "It'll warm you up." As Catherine sipped the strong brew, she studied her benefactor. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and strong hands. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with laugh lines around his eyes despite his serious expression. His dark hair, streaked with a touch of silver at the temples, was cut short, and a neatly trimmed beard framed his jawline. She guessed him to be in his early 30s. "Thank you," she murmured. "I don't know what we would have done if—" "No need to thank me," Zach interrupted, his tone gruff but kind. "No decent man would leave a woman and child out in weather like this." He nodded toward Emma. "How old?" 3 months, Catherine replied, adjusting the blanket around her daughter, who had finally settled now that they were warm. Zach nodded, then turned to the stove. "You must be hungry. I've got stew warming." Catherine wanted to protest that she didn't want to impose, but her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. Zach's mouth quirked in a small smile as he ladled thick beef stew into a bowl and placed it before her with a chunk of bread. "Eat," he said simply. "We can talk after." Catherine ate ravenously, suddenly aware of how famished she was. Zach busied himself around the cabin, tactfully giving her space. When she had finished, he took the empty bowl and refilled her coffee. "Now," he said, settling into the chair opposite her, "I reckon you didn't choose to be out wandering in a storm with a baby." "What happened?" Catherine hesitated, shame washing over her. What would this stranger think of a woman cast out by her husband? But something in Zach's steady gaze gave her courage. "My husband threw us out," she said quietly. He convinced himself Emma isn't his child, but she is," she added fiercely. "I've never been unfaithful." Zach's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Where are you headed?" Catherine looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have an aunt in Oregon, but that's hundreds of miles away. I was just walking." Zach was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "In the morning, we'll figure something out." "I couldn't impose, it's not an imposition," he said firmly. "I've got a spare room, it ain't much, but it's dry and warm." Too exhausted to argue, Catherine nodded gratefully. Zach showed her to a small bedroom off the main living area. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin for washing. "My ma's room," he explained. "She passed 3 winters ago. Everything's clean." "Thank you," Catherine whispered, overcome by his kindness. Zach nodded curtly. "Get some rest." "We'll talk more in the morning." The next day dawned clear and crisp, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Catherine awoke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Emma had slept better than she had in weeks, seeming to sense the safety of their surroundings. When Catherine emerged from the bedroom with Emma in her arms, she found Zach at the stove, his sleeves rolled up as he turned bacon in a cast iron skillet. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Coffee's hot." "Thank you," Catherine said, settling at the table, "for everything." Zach shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "How's the little one?" "Better," Catherine replied, smiling down at Emma, who was looking around with curious eyes. "She's usually fussy in the mornings, but she seems content today." Zach nodded, then served up plates of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "Winter's coming on fast. Roads to Oregon will be snowbound soon, if they aren't already. Not a journey you could make safely with a baby." Catherine's heart sank. She hadn't considered the season. "I suppose you're right." "You could stay here," Zach said, his tone casual, though his eyes were intent. "I've got the room. Come spring, if you still want to head to Oregon, I could help you get there proper." Catherine stared at him, stunned by the offer. "Stay here, but you don't know me." "I know enough," Zach replied. "I know you're a mother who'd walk through a storm to protect her child. That tells me what kind of person you are." He paused. "Look, I ain't suggesting anything improper. You'd have your privacy. But this is a big place for one man, and I could use the help around the ranch. You'd be earning your keep." Catherine studied him, searching for any sign of ulterior motives, but his expression was open and honest, his offer seemingly genuine. "Why would you do this for strangers?" She asked softly. A shadow passed across Zach's face. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said after a moment. "Besides, winter's hard enough out here without worrying about a woman and baby with nowhere to go." Catherine thought of her alternatives, which were essentially none, and of the long, harsh winter ahead. "If you're sure it wouldn't be an imposition." "Wouldn't have offered if it was," Zach said simply. "So it's settled. You and Emma stay here till spring, and then we'll see." And so Catherine and Emma became temporary residents of Zach Turner's ranch. The first few days were awkward as they established routines and boundaries, but gradually they settled into a comfortable rhythm. Zach's ranch was modest but well managed. He ran about 60 head of cattle, had 6 horses, and maintained a small vegetable garden that had been put to bed for the winter. He had a hired hand, Miguel Ramirez, who lived in a small cabin down the hill and helped with the cattle. Catherine quickly made herself useful, taking over the cooking and keeping the cabin clean. She discovered that while Zach was competent in the kitchen, he appreciated her more varied meals. She found sewing supplies in a chest and mended his shirts and jeans in the evenings while he whittled by the fire or read from one of his surprisingly numerous books. As the days passed, Catherine learned more about her taciturn host. Zach had come west from Pennsylvania after the Civil War, where he'd fought for the Union. He'd worked as a cowhand for several years before saving enough to buy his own land. He'd brought his widowed mother out to live with him, and they'd built the ranch together before her passing. "She would have liked you," he told Catherine one evening as they sat by the fire, Emma sleeping in a cradle he had fashioned from a wooden crate. "Ma always said this place needed a woman's touch." Catherine smiled, touched by the compliment. She raised a good son. Zach looked embarrassed, turning his attention back to the piece of wood he was carving. Later, when he presented her with the finished item, a delicate figurine of a mother holding a baby, Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Just a trinket," he said gruffly, but she could see he was pleased by her reaction. The first snow came in early December, blanketing the ranch in white. Zach and Miguel worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to feed and water, often returning to the cabin with frost in their beards and exhaustion in their eyes. On those evenings, Catherine made sure there was hot food waiting and warm water for washing. She noticed how Zach's eyes would soften when he entered the cabin to find her and Emma waiting, the table set, and the room filled with the aroma of fresh bread or stew. One night, as a blizzard howled outside, Catherine sat nursing Emma while Zach read aloud from David Copperfield. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how quickly they had fallen into this familial pattern, how natural it felt to share these quiet evenings together. "What is it?" Zach asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I was just thinking how different things were a month ago," Catherine admitted. "I never expected to find." She trailed off, uncertain how to express what she was feeling. "A home," Zach suggested quietly. "Yes," she said softly, "though it's temporary, of course." Something flickered in Zach's eyes, but he merely nodded and returned to his reading. As Christmas approached, Catherine noticed Zach making mysterious trips to the barn, refusing her offers to help. On Christmas Eve, after Emma was asleep, he presented her with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said, suddenly seeming nervous, "but I thought the little one should have something for her first Christmas." Inside the package was a beautifully crafted wooden rattle, polished smooth with Emma's initials carefully burned into the handle. "Oh, Zach," Catherine breathed, running her fingers over the fine workmanship. "It's perfect." She had made him a gift, as well a new woolen scarf she had knitted in secret using yarn found in his mother's trunk. When she gave it to him, his fingers brushed against hers, lingering for a moment. "Thank you, Catherine," he said, his voice husky. Later that night, as they sat drinking hot cider, Catherine found herself studying Zach's profile in the firelight. She had grown to admire his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness, and his gentle way with Emma. When had her gratitude transformed into something deeper, the thought startled her. It was too soon after her failed marriage to be thinking such things. Besides, Zach had never indicated that he saw her as anything more than someone in need of help. Yet sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster, and she wondered if perhaps he felt the strange connection between them too. January brought bitter cold and more snow. The world outside the cabin seemed frozen and still, but inside, life continued in its new pattern. Emma grew stronger each day, learning to roll over and laughing when Zach made funny faces at her. Catherine noticed how he never referred to her as Mrs. Eldridge anymore, but simply as Catherine, her name spoken with a warmth that made her feel cherished. One evening, as a particularly fierce storm raged outside, Zach shared more of his past with her. He spoke of the war, of the friends he had lost, and of his dream to build something lasting here in Montana. "After seeing so much destruction," he said quietly, "I wanted to create something, a place where things grow instead of die." "You've done that," Catherine told him. "This ranch, it's full of life. Still feels like something's missing sometimes," he admitted, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the fire. The moment hung between them, full of unspoken possibilities, until Emma's cry broke the silence. As Catherine rose to tend to her daughter, she felt Zach's gaze follow her, warm and steady as the fire that kept the winter at bay. February brought Catherine's first letter from her aunt in Oregon, forwarded by the postmaster in Silver Creek, who had been sworn to secrecy about her whereabouts. The letter was full of concern and offers of help, ending with an invitation to come stay whenever Catherine was ready. "Good news?" Zach asked, seeing her thoughtful expression as she folded the letter. "My aunt wants us to come to Oregon," Catherine explained. "She says she can help me find work there." Zach's face remained carefully neutral. "Spring's not far off. You'll be able to travel safely in a month or so." Catherine nodded, but her heart wasn't in it. The prospect of leaving the ranch, of leaving Zach, no longer held the appeal it once might have. That night, unable to sleep, Catherine slipped from her bed to make a cup of tea. She found Zach already at the table, staring into a mug of coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Too much on my mind." Catherine sat across from him, wrapping her shawl tighter around her nightdress. "Would it help to talk about it?" Zach was silent for a long moment, then spoke with careful deliberation. "I've been thinking about what happens when spring comes." Catherine's heart quickened. "Oh. I know we agreed you'd stay till then," he continued, his eyes fixed on his coffee. "But I've gotten used to having you and Emma here. The place feels like a home again." "It's felt that way to me too," Catherine admitted. Zach looked up, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "I'm not good with words, Catherine, but I need to say this." He took a deep breath. "I don't want you to go to Oregon. I want you to stay here with me." Catherine's breath caught. "Zach, I know it's sudden," he rushed on, "and maybe I've misread things. But these past months, watching you with Emma, seeing your strength and kindness, I've come to care for you both more than I thought possible." "We care for you too," Catherine whispered. "I'm asking if you might consider making this arrangement permanent," Zach said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Not just as my housekeeper, but as my wife. If you need more time, I understand, but I wanted you to know how I feel before you made any decisions about leaving." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "I don't need more time," she said, her voice trembling. "These months with you have shown me what a true partnership can be. You've been kind and respectful, and you love Emma as if she were your own." "She is my own in all the ways that matter," Zach said firmly, "just as I hope you'll be mine." Catherine rose from her chair and moved around the table to stand before him. Zach stood too, towering over her, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll be your wife." The joy that transformed Zach's face made her heart soar. He cupped her face in his large, calloused hands and bent to kiss her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I promise you won't regret this," he whispered against her lips. "I'll spend every day making sure of it." They were married in the small church in the nearest town as soon as the roads were clear enough for travel. The ceremony was simple, attended by Miguel and a few of Zach's rancher friends. Catherine wore a new blue dress that Zach had ordered specially from the mercantile, and Emma, now 7 months old, wore a tiny white gown that Catherine had sewn from one of Zach's mother's old tablecloths. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zach kissed her with a restrained passion that promised more once they were alone. As they signed the marriage certificate, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness. Zachary Turner was now her husband, and she was Catherine Turner. They were a family. After the ceremony, as they drove the wagon back to the ranch, Emma sleeping peacefully between them, Zach reached over to take Catherine's hand. "I have something to show you when we get home," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "What is it?" Catherine asked, curious. "A surprise," he replied with a mysterious smile. When they arrived at the ranch, Zach helped her down from the wagon, then scooped up the still sleeping Emma. "Come with me," he said, leading her not toward the cabin but toward the barn. Inside, he guided her to a corner where a large object stood covered by a tarp. With his free hand, he pulled the covering away to reveal a beautifully crafted cradle made of polished pine. "Oh, Zach," Catherine breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful." "I've been working on it for weeks," he admitted. I hoped Emma might not be the only one to use it." Catherine looked up at him, her heart swelling with love. "Are you saying you want more children?" I'm saying I want everything with you, Zach said, his voice rough with emotion. A house full of children growing old together, building something that lasts. He looked down at Emma, who was beginning to stir in his arms. I already love this little girl like she's my own. Any others we might be blessed with would just be adding to our family. Catherine felt tears of happiness spill down her cheeks. I want that too, she whispered, all of it. That night, after they had put Emma to bed in her new cradle, Zach and Catherine came together as husband and wife for the first time. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the bond that had grown between them over the winter months. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Catherine marveled at the journey that had brought her here. 4 months ago, she had been cast out into a storm, alone and afraid. Now she was loved, cherished, part of a family she had never dared hope for. What are you thinking about? Zach murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. About that night in the rain, Catherine replied. How close I came to walking past your cabin. Zach's arms tightened around her. I thank God every day that you knocked on my door. So do I, Catherine said softly. You saved us, Zach. No, he corrected gently. You saved me. I was just existing before you and Emma came along. Now I'm living. Spring came to the ranch, bringing new growth and new beginnings. The cattle thrived, the garden Catherine planted flourished, and Emma took her first tentative steps across the cabin floor, falling into Zach's waiting arms with peals of laughter. By summer, Catherine's suspicions were confirmed. She was expecting their first child together. When she told Zach, he swept her into his arms and spun her around the yard, his face alight with joy. Did you hear that, Emma? He called to the toddler, watching them from her blanket under the apple tree. You're going to be a big sister. Emma clapped her hands, not fully understanding but responding to the happiness in her parents' faces. As Catherine watched her husband and daughter together, she felt a sense of peace and contentment that she had once thought lost to her forever. The storm that had driven her to Zach's door had been the beginning, not the end. Their son was born the following winter, a robust boy with his father's blue eyes, whom they named William after Zach's father. As Catherine nursed him by the fire, with Emma curled against her side and Zach watching them with pride and love, she knew that the family they had created was stronger than any storm. I love you, Zach said, reaching out to touch her cheek. All of you, my family. And we love you, Catherine replied, her heart full to bursting. Thank you for opening your door that night. Best decision I ever made, Zach said with a smile that still made her heart race, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Outside, snow fell softly on the ranch, but inside the cabin, warmth and love abounded. The woman who had once been cast out with her baby in arms had found her true home, and the cowboy who had opened his door had found the family he had always longed for. Together, they had built something lasting, a love that would endure through all seasons.